As the late afternoon sun cast a warm glow in my bedroom, I was busy tidying up when I suddenly heard the door creak softly behind me. I felt a rush of anticipation, begging him silently not to stop as my stepson filled the space around me completely. I pivoted and there was Alden, framed in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the item cradled in my hands. My heart stopped its rhythm. How can I express this clearly? The object held a menacing presence, far from being harmless. There stood a magnificent, vibrantly hued toy well. An object so striking it demanded attention in any conversation of substance. As I pulled it from the drawer, my mind was elsewhere, focused on the task of cleaning the back of the cabinet. Unaware of the significance of the moment, I thought I had locked the door tight. Alden was my stepchild, just 23 years young. He had not yet been anticipated to return home. He toiled at a local brewery, often finding himself in the company of friends, as the night unfolded after his shifts. There he stood, tall and slender, his black hair flowing gracefully into his amused blue eyes. "What is that?" he asked, his voice dancing between curiosity and mischief, making my cheeks burn with embarrassment. I let go of the item as though it had burned me, swiftly grabbing the next object, a throw pillow from the bed, to hide it away. "It's not your concern," I mumbled. As I felt a tightening in my throat, I observed that his demeanor stayed the same, unyielding and steady. Instead, he rested against the door frame, his curiosity growing ever stronger. "There's no need to pretend you're embarrassed," he remarked with a light-hearted laugh. "I have certainly done that. Never before had I come across anything quite like that." It filled me with a longing to fade into the shadows. It is truly striking how this person remains there, calm and collected, while my world descends into turmoil. I summoned a chuckle, keen to lighten the atmosphere of scrutiny. Alden remarked, honestly, "Focus on your own business. Your arrival here is unexpected." Yet he stayed motionless. For a few periods, silence wrapped around us, thick and almost unbearable. He averted his eyes from the pillow cradled in my hands. His gaze was fixed upon me. His gaze was sharp, devoid of the usual easygoing or playful expressions that I had come to know. This one clung on with unwavering determination and fervent intensity. It felt as if he had peeled away a layer of the facade I wore, unveiling a wholly different person beneath. In that moment, a curious warmth ignited deep within my chest, only to be swiftly followed by a sharp pang of remorse that cut through the air like a whisper of regret. This was incorrect. This was undeniably incorrect. I found myself in the role of his stepmother, for heaven's sake. Once upon a time, I found myself united in marriage with his father. I shattered the silence and stirred the calm. Alden merely shrugged, lifting his hands in a feigned gesture. "Submission," he acknowledged with a relaxed demeanor, yet just before leaving, he threw one last look my way. A gaze that deepened the storm of thoughts swirling in my mind as the door closed behind him. I settled myself at the edge of the bed, the pillow pressed tightly against my chest, my heart racing with anticipation. The item eluded my efforts to place it back in the drawer. A subtle shift had taken place in the air between us was thick with unspoken words. And no matter how hard I tried to push it aside, I understood that my view of Alden would forever be altered for the rest of the night. The moment danced in the corridors of my mind. I embarked on a journey of effort. I crafted a delightful supper, arranging the. As the laundry spun in the background, I settled onto the couch beside Victor, who was lost in the world of classic westerns flickering on the television. Still, Alden's joyful grin, and the unsettling sparkle in his gaze remained etched in my thoughts. Victor barely noticed my distraction. It was but a fleeting moment, easily brushed aside. For years, he had immersed himself in his passions, tending to his garden, crafting with wood, and unraveling the mysteries of crossword puzzles, ever since he embraced retirement. I held no bitterness toward him for this. That would have has been excessively straightforward. Yet, there were moments when I saw myself more as a caretaker than a partner. I caught a fleeting glimpse of Alden's shadow as it danced through his room and glided down the hall. I perceived the gentle resonance. The music flowed from his door, a deep bass line that clashed with the serene atmosphere of the home, stirring my heart in a way I couldn't quite understand. I turned my attention to my husband, Victor, who lay peacefully in slumber. His chin gently dipped toward his chest. Once again, he had drifted off into the embrace of sleep in his recliner. As the television hummed on, I found myself pondering whether to awaken him, only to wonder what purpose it would serve. I stood and wandered toward the kitchen, savoring a fleeting moment of solitude, yet my isolation was fleeting. Alden stepped inside, his bare feet making no sound at all. On the hardwood floor, he donned a well-worn t-shirt and comfortable sweatpants. His hair was a delightful mess, as if he'd just run his fingers through it in a moment of carefree abandon. "Hey," he remarked with a relaxed demeanor, as he swung open the fridge and reached for a bottle of water. "It seems the night has wrapped its cloak around you." "I could say the same about you," I replied, maintaining a playful tone. With a warm smile, he leaned against the counter, exuding a sense of ease and charm. Counter, simply unwinding. It's a challenge, isn't it, to navigate through life? Within these walls, there were moments when the words spoken caused me to reflect. "What do you mean by that?" He shrugged, yet a flicker of something profound lingered in his gaze. "It's merely the experience of being back in this place once more. It seems to me that I northwest longer find my place in this world." I became gentler. In that moment, despite all that had transpired, a flicker of maternal concern stirred within me. "It's merely a fleeting moment, Alden. In time, you'll uncover the answers you seek. You possess great intelligence and remarkable abilities. You will find your way back to solid ground." "Thank you." Molina spoke, his voice now softer. "Thank you for that." For a fleeting moment, we lingered in silence in the kitchen, feeling somehow diminished. The distance that once separated us began to dissolve, even as we remained still. His gaze held mine, and once more, I experienced that familiar spark of warmth blossoming in my chest. I cleared my throat and occupied my hands, scrubbing the counter with fervor, eager to shatter the looming enchantment that threatened to ensnare me. Yet, Alden had more to share about what had transpired earlier. His tone began to dance with a playful spirit once more. "There's no need for you to feel any shame, my friend. Well, we are all part of this human experience, aren't we?" My hand paused mid-wipe, and I turned to him, striving to maintain my composure. "Alden, let us steer clear of that topic. Well, it happened by chance, and there's really no need to revisit it." "All right," he declared, lifting his hands in a gesture of capitulation. Yet, there was a playful glint in his smile that sent my stomach into a whirl. As he strolled by, he drew near enough for me to catch a subtle hint of his cologne in the air. I remained facing forward. Yet his presence lingered behind me for a fleeting moment before he finally departed from the kitchen that night while I lay in bed beside Victor. Thoughts swirled in a whirlwind. What was unfolding around me, around us, within these walls? I had always managed to keep my boundaries intact, lines drawn firmly in the sand, yet Alden had a knack for blurring those edges, even without intention. And the most challenging part was that I wasn't certain I wanted him to cease until the dawn broke, and I attempted to carry on as if everything were ordinary. As the sun began to rise, I set about crafting breakfast, just as I had countless times before. Eggs sizzled in the pan, toast browned to perfection, and the rich aroma of coffee filled the air for Victor, while I blended a refreshing smoothie for myself. Alden was the last to wander into the kitchen, just as he always did. With his hair still damp from a recent shower, he casually greeted Victor with a morning salutation, while his warm smile directed at me sent a thrilling rush through my veins. At the table, The three of us gathered, surrounded by the gentle clinking of silverware and the occasional snippets of conversation that danced through the air. Yet, beneath the surface, I sensed the tension each time Alden's hand grazed mine, while we exchanged the salt or topped off our coffee. It carried a sense of intention. I noticed him observing me even more closely. Then, with a gaze that was both steady and unreadable, Victor, of course, remained oblivious to all of this. Once breakfast had come to a close, Alden graciously extended his hand to assist me in tidying up. Typically, he would have slipped away to his room or ventured out with friends, so his unexpected offer took me by surprise. "You don't have to," I said, stacked plates in the sink. "I want to," he replied, already reaching for a dish rag. We toiled in quietude for a time. Yet the atmosphere surrounding us crackled with unspoken energy. In a moment of serendipity, I reached for a glass just as he did, and our hands met in an unexpected collision. Neither of us withdrew right away. "You're different," he said, his voice barely rising above a whisper, a hint of intrigue lacing his words. "What do you mean by that?" I inquired. My throat suddenly felt parched, and he paused, his gaze probing into mine. "I am unfamiliar with you. Only you do not conform to the expectations set for women of your age." I chuckled uneasily, retreating a step to carve out a little space between us. "Ah, how kind of you to say." I guess it's not merely that he maintained his serious tone now. "You exist in truth. You truly pay attention." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard, revealing the depth of emotion that lay beneath the surface. Words eluded me in that moment. With a sigh, I redirected my attention to the pile of dishes awaiting my care. As I scrubbed, an unmistakable presence lingered just behind me. Once more, my heart raced with fervor, and I loathed the depth of my desire for him to linger there while I struggled to collect my thoughts. Victor's voice echoed from the living room, beckoning Molina. "Where has my crossword book wandered off to?" The moment fractured, and Alden retreated slightly, offering me a subtle, understanding smile. He said, "I'll let you get back to him." His voice danced lightly in the air as he strolled away. A wave of relief washed over me, intertwined with a deep sense of longing. I sensed I was engaging with once upon a time. There was a flickering flame. Yet, a part of me couldn't resist the allure of the warmth that day. I filled my hours with errands, seeking anything to keep my thoughts engaged. Upon my return home, I discovered Alden perched on the porch steps, gazing thoughtfully at the yard before him. He appeared to be wandering through the depths of his mind. A stark contrast to the assured young man I had always known, he murmured softly as I drew near. He lifted his gaze, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "Greetings. Is everything going well with you?" He paused for a moment, responding, "Indeed," pondering over what exactly. Reflecting on life, pondering the path I'm on, contemplating where I ought to be going. I settled beside him, maintaining a respectful distance, yet near enough to sense the comforting warmth of his presence. "You are still in your youth, Alden. There's no need to have every piece of the puzzle in place just yet." "Perhaps," he murmured, his eyes lingering on the yard. After a moment of reflection, he continued, "Do you ever sense that you're destined for something beyond this, like? Are you ensnared?" In the tale that unfolded, his words resonated deeper than I was willing to acknowledge. I felt a strong urge to soothe him, to assure him that all would be well. Yet, deep down, I knew I didn't truly believe that. Instead, I rested my hand on his shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You're not trapped," I said, my voice quivering slightly, hoping he wouldn't catch the unease beneath my words. For a fleeting moment, he enveloped my hand with his, and the gesture resonated with an intimacy that felt almost surreal. I withdrew swiftly, yet the harm had already been inflicted. Another line crossed, another boundary blurred, and I found myself questioning whether I possessed the strength to halt it any longer. As the evening descended, the sky cloaked itself in darkness, heralding the approach of a storm. The air felt thick, laden with an unspoken tension, as if the world held its breath in anticipation. The world was poised, as if it held its breath, anticipating the unfolding of an event yet to come. Victor had retired for the night sooner than usual, as was his custom, grumbling about a persistent ache in his shoulder. As I nestled into the cozy embrace of the living room, a book cradled in my hands, my mind wandered, unable to escape the tempest raging beyond the window. Reflecting the essence of a singular structure within me, there was an air of restlessness, unpredictability, and danger. Alden found himself in the kitchen. The gentle creak of the fridge door swinging open and shut echoes softly through the stillness of the house. The soft sound of glass meeting glass reached my ears as he poured himself a drink. Shortly thereafter, he emerged in the doorway of the living room, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. He inquired, arching an eyebrow with curiosity. I blinked, surprised by the moment. I typically don't indulge at this hour. Perhaps tonight is a special occasion, he remarked with a playful smile, offering me a glass before I could even respond. I paused for a moment. Yet I reached for the cool glass. With a gentle push against my palm, Alden settled into the armchair opposite me, extending his legs in a relaxed manner. With an easygoing flair. The lamp beside me bathed his face in a soft, inviting light, accentuating the defined contours of his jaw, and the delicate shadow of stubble gracing his chin. What tale are you diving into? He inquired, gesturing toward the book resting in my lap. Just a little something, I said, lifting it up. In a fleeting moment, he wore a sly grin, hinting at the mundane yet intriguing tale that lay beneath the surface. That seems quite unbelievable to me. With a gentle chuckle, I savored a sip of the whiskey. It seared. Yet it offered a cherished diversion from the suspense that had been mounting. Throughout the day, we lingered in a cozy silence, the tempest beyond our walls intensifying with each passing moment. Yet, he found his voice once more. His voice carries a deep resonance. May I pose a question to you? I cast a weary glance in his direction. It all hinges on the specifics. He swirled the liquid in his glass, his gaze locked onto it as if he were weaving together the threads of his thoughts. Have you ever found yourself in a moment of stagnation? His question caught me off guard. It had an unsettling resemblance to the question he'd posed earlier on the porch, yet now it carried a different gravity. At times, I found myself confessing that my voice was softer than I had meant it to be. He lifted his gaze, and in that moment, our eyes locked together. It appears you are not the type to find yourself ensnared. You possess a vibrancy that transcends that notion. My cheeks warmed, and I averted my gaze, placing my glass gently on the table. Alden. It would be wise to refrain from expressing such thoughts. Why not? Indeed, it is. His words lingered in the air, heavy with silent significance. I rose suddenly, feeling the urge to create distance between us. I believe it's time we brought this evening to a close, I murmured, steering clear of his eyes. Just as I was about to step out of the room, darkness enveloped me as the power flickered and vanished. The unexpected shroud of darkness enveloped me, and I found myself rooted in place, caught in a moment of stillness. I whispered, my voice trembling. It's merely the storm, Alden remarked, his voice steady and reassuring. I caught the gentle rustle of his feet gliding over the carpet. Just a moment, let me fetch a flashlight. I sensed his approach, the subtle whisper of fabric brushing against itself as he drew near. In that moment, his hand grazed mine in the shadows, and I inhaled sharply, caught off guard. Apologies slipped from his lips, yet he remained close, unwilling to break the connection. His hand lingered warm against mine, and the air between us seemed to dance with unspoken words. I remained still. I was unable to do so. My heart raced with such intensity, I was convinced he could hear its thunderous beat. Molina spoke gently, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. I shifted my gaze in his direction, despite my reservations. In the enveloping darkness, he remained unseen, yet his presence enveloped me like a comforting cloak. I could sense his warmth. The rhythmic rise and fall of his steady breathing, a silent promise in the night. And then his hand glided up to my wrist, cradling it softly. "This is a bad idea," I said, my voice quivering with uncertainty. "I understand," he said, yet he held on tightly. The first crack of lightning illuminated the room for a fleeting moment, and in that instant, I beheld his face, earnest, vulnerable, and achingly near, before he kissed me. The kiss began gently, a hesitant brush of lips, as if he were poised for my rejection, yet I did not. Instead, I found myself leaning into him, my hands gripping his shirt, as if he were the only solid thing in the spinning world. When the lights flickered back on, we broke apart. Both of us breathing hard at the reality of what just hit me like a wave. I stepped back, my hands trembling. "It simply cannot be," I declared, my head shaking in disbelief. Alden chose silence. He lingered in silence, his face a canvas of mystery. "I know," he said, his voice unwavering, yet the harm had already been inflicted. The ensuing days unfolded like a hazy dream, filled with fleeting glances and words left unvoiced. I steered clear of Alden as much as possible, immersing myself in chores and errands, seeking any distraction to occupy my thoughts. Yet, despite my efforts, I couldn't shake the memory of his lips on mine, or the way his hand had brushed against my wrist one evening while I folded laundry in the guest room. When Alden appeared in the doorway, "We must converse," he declared, his tone resolute. I kept my gaze fixed downward. "There's simply no tale to unfold." "Indeed, there is." As he entered the room, he gently shut the door, sealing off the world outside. I let out a sigh, placing the laundry aside as I finally locked eyes with him. "Alden, whatever this is, it must come to an end." "Is it truly wrong, then?" he inquired with a tone that dared me to question my own feelings. His words sent a chill racing down my spine, yet I summoned the strength to remain steadfast. "Stay calm. You don't grasp the implications. If Victor ever discovered the truth, Alden would step in. And even if he did find out, do you honestly believe he would care? He hardly acknowledges your presence these days." His words pierced through, not just because they held a kernel of truth, but that truth did not render them just. "This isn't about him," I said, my voice rising. "It's about us, about the undeniable truth that this, whatever this is, cannot happen. It's not merely incorrect. It cannot be done." Alden stepped closer, his gaze fixed intently on mine. "What is the reason behind this? For fear of others' judgments, you find yourself trapped in the labyrinth of your own thoughts." I parted my lips to speak, yet silence enveloped me. Molina continued, his voice taking on a gentler tone. "I'm not aiming to complicate things for you, but I can't ignore the feelings I have for you. And I sense you might feel the same." Tears threatened to spill from the corners of my eyes, and I turned my gaze away from you. "I find myself at a loss," I murmured, "then elucidate it for me." He spoke with a tone that was almost desperate, yet I found myself unable to articulate the tumult within me, the guilt, the fear, the longing that battled for dominance. With a firm shake of my head, I brushed past him, exiting the room in silence. On that night, sleep eluded me. As I reclined in bed, my gaze fixed upon the ceiling, I found myself enveloped in the gentle, soothing rhythm of Victor's breath beside me. My mind swirled with a tempest of thoughts and feelings, each one intertwined in a chaotic dance that I could not unravel. At a certain moment, I rose and made my way to the kitchen, yearning for a glass of water to soothe my restless spirit. As I entered the hallway, time seemed to stand still. Alden's door stood ajar, and there he was, leaning against the doorframe, as if he had been anticipating my arrival. "Restless?" he inquired, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, lost in silence, struggling to summon the words. For a long moment, we simply gazed at one another, the silence enveloping us, thick and electric. In that moment, as if guided by an unseen force, I found myself turning and making my way back to my room, the door gently clicking shut behind me. Yet, as I settled back down, a sense lingered within me that this tale was far from its conclusion. This strange, perilous connection we shared was not fading, and I found myself uncertain about my desire for it. The next occurrence unfolded without the cover of a storm, or the flicker of a light to retreat into. This moment was intentional. It began in the laundry room of all places. As I drew warm towels from the dryer, the familiar rhythm of folding them provided a gentle reprieve, a momentary escape from the ordinary. In the stillness of the house, silence reigned supreme. Victor had ventured to a friend's abode for a game, and I was under the impression that I had the place all to myself. Then I heard the gentle creak of the floorboards behind me, always at work. Alden said, his voice airy yet tinged with an elusive undertone I couldn't quite identify. I chose not to look back. Someone must take action, I replied, striving to maintain a calm demeanor. He chuckled gently. Fair enough, but do you ever find yourself weary? What is it weary of? Managing all the details. Caring for all around you. When was the last moment someone truly looked after you? His words pierced my soul like a blade. I turned, clutching a folded towel against my chest as if it were a shield, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Alden, I believe this isn't a discussion we ought to engage in. Why not? He inquired, casually leaning against the doorframe. He appeared completely at ease. Seemingly untroubled, yet his eyes whispered a different tale. They were keen, probing, and utterly fixated on me as I spoke, my voice wavering. It's not appropriate, he reiterated, as if weighing the word carefully. That's not quite the same as being honest, is it? I felt the urge to engage in the debate as well. Silence him before he has the chance to utter anything further that could deepen the trouble. Yet, just as I was about to, he moved in nearer. As he drew nearer, his voice was gentle. You don't need to put on a facade with me, Molina. I behold you. In the quiet corners of this home, I witness how you hold it all, how you weave the threads of our lives into a tapestry, while others merely take without thought. Do you not believe you are worthy of something just for you? My throat tightened and I shook my head, stepping back until I felt the edge of the counter against my hips. Alden, this must come to an end, whatever it may be. As he extended his hand, it gently grazed against mine. It was a modest, unassuming act, yet it felt as though the very earth beneath my feet was transforming. You feel it too, don't you? He asked. His voice was scarcely louder than a breath. I opened my mouth to respond, yet silence enveloped me, for the truth was a weight I could not bear to twist, neither to him nor to my own heart. And then, just like that enchanting night in the living room, he kissed me. Yet, this time, I let him continue. The days that came after were a haze of cherished instances and hushed confessions. We took great care, or so we believed. Alden had a knack for weaving himself into my space, always ready with a reason to stay close. He would offer his assistance with dinner, take on the task of mending a cabinet door, and even eagerly join me for errands in those early days. The excitement was palpable, a tantalizing dance with the forbidden. Yet the gravity of our circumstances loomed large over me. I sensed it was a fleeting moment, destined to fade away. It was clear to me that the inevitable moment was approaching when all would come tumbling down. One afternoon, as I was putting away groceries, I felt a sudden embrace from behind. Alden had come up and wrapped his arms around my waist. I tensed, casting a wary look toward the doorway, ensuring that no one lingered in the shadows. Alden hissed, attempting to break free. Six could stroll in any moment. Hooney's at the hardware store, Alden spoke with a calm and relaxed voice, yet I found it impossible to ease my own tension any longer. The creeping dread was beginning to gnaw at my very being. Each time Victor's gaze met mine, I couldn't help but ponder whether he was aware of the moments when Bethany, our ever-curious neighbor, greeted me from the other side of the street. It was as if her gaze pierced my very soul. "We need to talk," she said, turning to face Alden, ready to address his request. His expression was unable to convey what he felt about us. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, a flicker of anger danced in his eyes. "What is our tale? This hobuzzy. Stop," I uttered, pushing the words through my lips. "It's far too perilous. It's unjust to Victor." Victor's voice echoed, ascending in pitch. "What about fair to you? Do you truly listen to your own words? Your mind is so consumed with thoughts of him that you've forgotten to consider your own desires. What I desire holds no significance." I lost my composure. "It's not about me," Alden retorted sharply. "Happiness is a treasure that is rightfully yours, Malina. You are worthy of being with someone who truly understands the essence of your expressions." Suspended in the atmosphere, weighty and unyielding. In the depths of my mind, a battle raged. I yearned to voice my dissent, to proclaim his error, yet an undeniable truth lingered within me, whispering that he was, in fact, correct. The moment of truth arrived a few weeks later when Victor extended an invitation to Bethany and her husband for dinner. And I was striving to embody the essence of the ideal hostess. Yet, throughout the evening, Bethany's keen gaze lingered on me, and I couldn't escape the unsettling notion that she held a secret after dinner. While I was tidying up in the kitchen, Bethany approached me with intent. "You've been quite lost in thought lately," she remarked. Her tone was relaxed, yet her eyes were searching, as if she were caught up in a whirlwind of thoughts. I responded, mustering a smile. "Imagine her, leaning in just a bit," her voice dropping to a whisper. "Is it possible that Victor is aware?" "No," I have encased my heart, thumping within my chest. "No," she shrugged, her expression a mystery. "Whatever's unfolding between you and Alden." The earth seemed to vanish beneath my feet, leaving me in a void of confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, my voice trembling with uncertainty. Bethany smiled, yet the warmth of her expression failed to illuminate her eyes. "Exercise caution. Malina's secrets have a way of revealing themselves under the cover of night." As I reclined in my bed, the echoes of Bethany's words danced through my thoughts, refusing to fade away. I found myself ensnared, suspended between two realms that refused to harmonize. The following morning, Alden discovered me in the garden, yanking weeds with an intensity that seemed excessive. "You're steering clear of me," he remarked. His voice remained steady, yet it carried a hint of frustration. "I'm striving to shield us," I responded, my gaze fixed elsewhere. "Shield us from what he requested." As I drew nearer to the chaos unfolding before us, I spoke up. As I stood there, I casually wiped my hands on my jeans. "Bethany is familiar with Alden. She understands." His brow furrowed, a shadow creeping across his face. "How could she possibly know?" "I'm not certain, but she holds the answer," I remarked. Her voice rose. "And if she were to tell Victor she wouldn't," he stated firmly, "you don't know that." I lost my composure. "You cannot fathom the peril that lies ahead." Alden took hold of my hand. His grasp firm yet gentle. Excruciating. "What I grasp is that I wish to hold onto you tightly." The deep feeling in his voice took me by surprise, leaving me momentarily at a loss for words. "You shall not." I finally spoke, my voice a mere whisper, yet we must tread carefully for the sake of us both. The days that followed were filled with a palpable tension. Bethany remained silent. To Victor, at least not that I was aware of, but the burden of her doubt lingered around me, casting a shadow like an ominous cloud. Alden attempted to calm my nerves. Yet there was an unmistakable tension in his demeanor, more pronounced than I had ever seen. Then, one fateful evening, Victor returned home sooner than I had anticipated. In the laundry room, Alden and I found ourselves standing closer than we ought to have been. Suddenly, the sound of the front door creaking open sent us leaping apart. Our hearts racing like those of guilty teenagers caught in a moment they shouldn't have shared. Victor summoned my name, his voice resonating throughout the house, and in that moment, I responded. My voice unwavering even as the panic surged within me. Victor stepped into the doorway, his gaze roaming across the room. For a fleeting instant, I believed he was poised to share a thought. Yet he merely offered a nod instead. Dinner is nearly there, I remarked. In a flash, he departed without uttering another syllable. Yet the gaze he cast upon me remained etched in my mind long after his figure faded from view. That night, slumber eluded me. I found myself revisiting that moment in the laundry room, where Victor's gaze had held onto me for just a heartbeat longer than it should have. I sensed I was perched on the brink of a precipice. It was merely a question of time before everything would come tumbling down, and still, I found myself unable to bring the curtain down on it all. What existed between Alden and me was something monumental, an all-encompassing force that made it impossible to just turn my back on it. But deep within, I sensed the tempest was far from finished. The tale was only just unfolding. It began with Victor arriving home earlier than usual, but this time, it was more than just the hour. That took me by surprise. His face bore a tautness, an expression that held secrets untold. As he crossed the threshold of the house and placed his briefcase down with a purposeful thud, Alden Victor's voice rang out, cutting through the silence. Sufficient to send a thrill through my core. Alden strolled into the hallway moments later. His relaxed demeanor a stark contrast to Victor's palpable tension. What's happening? He inquired, propping himself against the wall, his hands tucked comfortably in his pockets. Victor's gaze focused. It's time for us to have a conversation, and it can't wait any longer. The cadence of his voice brooked no dissent. Alden cast a fleeting look in my direction. With a hint of unease flickering in his eyes, he followed Victor into the living room. There I was, rooted to the spot in the kitchen, my heart racing with every beat. At first, their words eluded me, only the deep resonance of Victor's voice reached my ears, accompanied by the softer, intermittent replies from Alden. Yet, as their dialogue deepened, the meaning of their words emerged distinctly. I understand the unfolding events, Victor declared, his tone as cold as frost. What are you saying? Alden responded, his voice steady yet cautious. Don't play dumb with me, Victor snapped. I've witnessed the glances you share, the way her eyes meet yours. Do you believe I can't see? Chills coursed through my veins. He was aware. Or at the very least, he had an inkling strong enough to face Alden Victor. You're weaving tales in your mind, Alden said. His voice, more composed than I ever imagined, reveals that nothing is amiss. Do not deceive me, Victor, he bellowed, and then came the sharp crack of something breaking, perhaps a glass, echoing through the air. The time had come for me to emerge from the shadows. I stepped into the doorway, my hands trembling, and Victor halted in his tracks. Both men turned to me, their expressions starkly contrasting. Victor's face was a tumultuous blend of anger and betrayal, while Alden wore a mask of defiance, Molina. Victor spoke, his voice now softer yet still laced with a palpable threat. Share with me the honest tale. Is there a tale unfolding between you two? I parted my lips, yet the words eluded me. My silence spoke volumes, and Victor let out a bitter laugh, his fingers running through his thinning hair. I felt it in my bones, he confessed, his voice trembling. I wished it weren't true, but deep down, I knew. Victor, please. I started to move in, but he cut me off, raising a hand. Don't even try to explain it, he said. There's nothing you can say that will make this okay. The atmosphere thickened, a palpable tension enveloping the room, punctuated solely by the relentless ticking of the clock on the wall. At last, Victor faced Alden, his gaze aflame with intensity. You're out, he declared with a chilling finality. Gather your belongings and set off this very night. Alden stood firm, his jaw set with determination. I shall remain right here. Indeed you are, Victor retorted. Under my roof. You will not show me such disrespect. I think you should calm down, Alden said, his tone low yet resolute, which only fueled Victor's anger further. He drew nearer to Alden. His fists tightly clenched at his sides. Do not suggest that I should find my composure, you little. Enough. I exclaimed, positioning myself firmly between them. Both of you, just stop. Victor turned to me, his eyes brimming with pain. How could you, Malina? He inquired, his voice trembling. After all that I've sacrificed for you. It was never my intention for things to unfold this way. I spoke, tears cascading down my cheeks. I always wished to protect you from pain. Indeed, you did, he remarked with a touch of bitterness. And now I find myself confronting the reality that my own wife and my son. He paused, a shake of his head signaling his disbelief. I find myself at a loss for words. Alden extended his hand toward mine, yet I withdrew from his grasp. I was unable to bear his touch, not at this moment, not with Victor observing. I believe it would be wise for me to take my leave. They murmured softly. Victor fixed his gaze upon me, his expression turning steely. You're not going anywhere, he declared with unwavering resolve. Welcome to my humble abode. Should anyone depart, it will be him, Victor. I started to speak, but he interrupted me. No, I would prefer not to. Listen closely, he urged, his voice quaking with a barely restrained fury. You've made your choice, Malina, and now you must face the consequences of Alden's departure that night. With a silence that spoke volumes, he filled a bag, each motion tight and precise. As if following an unspoken script. I trailed behind him to the driveway, each step a painful echo of my breaking heart. My voice barely broke the silence as I uttered, I'm sorry. Emotions cascading like a river down my cheeks. He turned to me, his expression gentler than I had anticipated. This isn't over, he said, his voice unwavering. You're aware of that, aren't you? I nodded, a silent agreement hanging in the air, yet words eluded me. Deep down, a flicker of doubt danced within me, casting shadows over my desire to trust his claim. As his car faded into the distance, a profound ache settled deep within my chest. A blend of remorse, absence, and an elusive feeling that I couldn't quite grasp.